I played my first King's Gambit as white, and my opponent responded with d5, which is called the Falkbeer Countergambit. It's called a countergambit because black is usually the one who ends up a pawn down. I played the book move, e takes d5, and the most common response here is to play e takes f4, and that's what I like to play as black against the King Gambit. But there's another move that the engine calls a mistake, but it's a book move, e4, and that's what my opponent played. That's called the Staunton line in this Falkbeer Countergambit. So this pawn is trying to disrupt white's development. It has control of the f3 square, and if white tries to push the d pawn, then the pawn can trade itself. So white might have to spend some time trying to recover this. Meanwhile, the pawn on d5 is out there all by itself and weak. I decided to play knight to c3 to defend d5, at least for another move. Probably going to lose that pawn. And I attack e4. But the engine didn't like that, the database didn't like that. You can see in the database here, overwhelmingly people play d3 trying to deal with that pawn right away. And if you follow through the main line, the top moves in the database, it looks like this. Knight f6 protects e4. White initiates the trade of pawns, and then plays knight f3, allowing bishop c5 with pressure on f2. I don't like this line as white. It looks scary. It looks like I need to know a lot of theory. But queen to e2 is played, pinning the knight to the king. And I guess white is not afraid of a check here. He'll just slide the king over. So bishop to f5 protecting the knight. Knight c3 attacks it again. Queen e7 attacks it again. Bishop d3. And now there are some different possible responses. So white intends to castle queenside. And it looks kind of messy and looks like I have to study that. So I don't want to play that d3 line. I like my move knight c3, and Boris Spassky agreed with me. He played it in 1971. All right, knight f6, bishop b5 check. I don't know about this move. I kind of regret it. I was expecting the move c6 so I can trade off my weak d-pawn, and that's what my opponent played. But I think it's better to not give me the opportunity to do that and just block with the bishop. Play could have went queen e2, bishop b4, bishop takes d7 check, knight b takes d7. And now it's going to be difficult to get this pawn, to win this pawn, because black's about to castle and put a rook on the e file. And that's where the queen and king are currently located. All right, I think my opponent should have tried that bishop d7. But he let me off the hook, played c6. I traded pawns and then put my bishop on c4, hitting f7. Bishop c5, taking advantage of this weak diagonal. Good move. I played d4, sacking my d-pawn, getting some open lines here. I want to get developed quickly. I want to castle queenside. But I think I should have just played d3. I think that's a little bit better. But d4 didn't make any difference in this game because my opponent took en passant anyway. All right. I think he had a better move, though. Let's take a look at queen takes d4. It's probably what I would have played, threaten a mate on f2. But we can trade queens, and knight ge2 hits the bishop, and then maybe white can go for the bishop pair. So that was a possibility. All right, but my opponent takes en passant. I play queen takes d3, knight bd7, and then bishop e3 I think was a mistake. I just didn't think very much on that move, challenging the bishop. I want to trade pieces, I want to castle. I'm up a pawn. I just want to secure my position. But this allows a pin with queen e7 here. It's not what my opponent played, but it does pin the bishop. And it turns out to be okay. At first the engine says, no, whoa, wait a minute, don't play bishop e3, that's going to lose material, but it doesn't. It settles down, it's about equal. King f1 is the way to get out of this because a rook is coming to e1 here. And for example, if bishop takes e3, then we just pin the bishop and we're going to win the piece back. Okay, maybe black can protect it for a move, but we're going to win the piece back. The engine actually suggests playing queen takes e3 and sacking the queen. And then rook e1, knight g4, rook takes queen, check, knight takes e3 check. King moves over to e2, or maybe e1 is better, I don't know. And so black just plays this with a rook and minor piece for a queen. Probably not the best line for a human. That's what the engine liked. But going back to this position where I played bishop to e3, just allowing this pin without really considering it, I think a better move is to play queen e2 check. I think this simplifies. Black is going to have to block the check on the e7 square. Bishop e7 in order to avoid trading queens. So now this position looks a lot better to get that bishop off of that active post. And then maybe bishop e3, knight b6, preventing long castles, but then bishop to d3 intending long castles. So that was a better way to play. Okay, but I played bishop e3, and my opponent just castles, okay, allowing me to castle long. Bishop takes e3. I'm happy to trade that bishop. I want to trade pieces, and it also gives me a nice pin on the queen here. But queen a5 was played. It's not a threat. I'm just going to develop knight f3, knight c5, and now my opponent starts to amass some pieces on the queen side. But I'm well defended. I've got two minor pieces. I can always step back to b3 here. a2 is guarded twice. Everything is fine. So I just develop. Knight d4. I want to trade some pieces over here. Queen b6 threatens mate on b2, so I play knight b3 to block. Knight takes b3, bishop takes b3. c5 is a threat to play c4, and the bishop can't move because of, well, that's not a mate, but bishop can't move because of queen takes b2 check. So I played knight a4, which means I think c5 was a mistake because I'm just going to win a pawn, forking the queen on the pawn here. Queen moves, I take the pawn. Rook intercedes to avoid the trade of queens. Queen c3 offering the trade of queens again. Queen a6 avoiding. Queen c4 pinning the rook, intending knight to c3. Not really pinning the rook, but pinning it if black doesn't want to trade queens. Bishop e6, queen c3, rook to b8, doubling the rooks. Looks menacing, but again, everything's under control. Queen d3 is a threat for a back rank mate here. Queen d8 would lead to a mate. Maybe, I don't know. No, I guess queen d8, there's knight e8. It's a possibility. Okay, well, my opponent thought it was a mate, maybe, and played h5 to get some lift. Rook e5, trying to trade pieces here, either trade queens or trade rooks. Bishop takes b3. I start with rook takes b5 before I take back with the a pawn. Okay, queen b7 gets out of that sort of a pin. Check, check. I'm low on time at this point. I'm under a minute. My opponent has 2 minutes. So I do have a 2-pawn advantage, but I have to play fairly accurately here to win with less than a minute. Okay, I play h3 intending g4 to break open the king side. Okay, I'm happy to trade those rooks. I needed to take back with the king rather than the queen because the g2 pawn would hang. So I take back with the king, queen d5 check, king steps over, knight comes in. I think that's a mistake because it allows knight c3 forking, trading another piece. Okay, now it should be pretty easy. a5, queen d2 offers the trade of queens. He declines, of course. I tuck my king away safely. h4, check. That was a mistake right there, just dropping the f4 pawn. Got 30 seconds left. He takes the f4 pawn. Okay, I offer trade of queens again. He declines. I centralize my queen, guard that pawn. g5. c4, finally do the right thing and start pushing my passed pawn. Now that's a terrible mistake. Queen to e5 check. I'm in a lot of time pressure, 25 seconds. He's got a minute 9. So I don't know why he wants to force the trade of queens. So when you're pressing your opponent on time, what you want to do is keep the position as complicated as possible, because that's going to eat up more of your opponent's time when he's trying to analyze all the possibilities in a complex position. This just allows me to trade down to an easily won king and pawn endgame, and my moves come even faster now. I can get a lot of pre-moves in. Okay, so now, of course, my c-pawn is going to win. I could have pushed my c-pawn, I guess, a long time ago, like right here, instead of bringing my king over. I could push it here, and the king can't stop it. But what can you do? You're in time pressure. And now I start to run around like a chicken with its head cut off for a while with 12 seconds left. For absolutely no reason, I decide, hey, I need to triangulate my king. I need to practice that. Okay. So it's important to go backwards with your king instead of forwards with your pawn. Okay. All right, finally I decide I'm going to queen my pawn, but even here I decide, no, I better escort my pawn home and play my king up first. My pawn can't handle the journey alone. Okay, but I get my pawn queened, and then with 6 seconds left, I'm wondering if I can mate him. So I do a typical time scramble maneuver. I sack my queen for the pawn. So at least that way I can't lose. If I run out of time, it's a draw because my opponent doesn't have mating material. So here I have 4.8 seconds. Can I checkmate with a king and queen? Let's see. There you go. That's the way to checkmate with 4.5 seconds left. Bring your king away from the action. Okay, I make the correction. Okay, I do push him over to the edge of the board pretty quickly and easily. It's a good reason. Blitz is a good reason to practice even simple things like king and queen versus king. Okay, and I made him. All right, with 2.8 seconds left. All right, that was my first King's Gambit ever as white. Well, at least in recent memory. All right, thanks for watching.